Welcome back to the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 124.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light.
Caleb, thank you very much for joining us this morning for what I think is going to be a very entertaining and informative conversation with Mike and myself. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
This is a long time running. Elliot first proposed getting you on the podcast. This is quite a bit of months ago, and Elliot Garber was one of our previous guests. And then we had the opportunity to reconnect at VIS this year in September, had dinner together, talking all things life, business, and said, hey, we need to get Caleb on this podcast sooner than later. So great to have it happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Elliot's podcast was awesome.
Excellent. See, that made him want to come back. It's perfect. So let's start this off. I think a great place to start, Caleb, with is your background. A really interesting background and dynamic as we talk about intentional living. Just walk us through a little bit of your veterinary journey and life in general towards what is instinct science.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can start at the beginning. So I grew up in central Pennsylvania in the mountains. We call it Pennsyltucky. It's really in the middle of nowhere, and small town sort of life. I did not have much, many people in my family with a medical background. It was really all business. And I, from an early age, developed an interest in science and nerded out in, sort of math classes, and always loved animals. And I remember in high school when it was time to, there was a program that I was in my very small high school, graduated with about 80, 90 people. But there was a program for students who were doing well in school or were in any advanced classes, and they placed you with career opportunities in the afternoons. I think it was my sophomore, junior year, and basically, they let you sort of pick what kind of career experiences you wanted to explore, and really didn't know much about veterinary medicine, but was like animals, have pets, love science. And so I made a list of career opportunities to sort of explore, had them all lined up. And the first one was with a small town veterinarian, small clinic, one doctor practice, fabulous veterinarian, definitely a James Herriot sort of style. It was the large animal, and it was really cool. It was an Amish farm, so it's Amish country in that part of Pennsylvania. So it was Amish farm, large animal farm medicine in the mornings, and then small animal in the afternoons. Knew nothing about large animal medicine really, and I remember I think I was 16. That first experience, I canceled all. I was there till 10 p.m. that night. I was supposed to leave at 4. I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. Canceled all my other experiences. And so it's that sort of story. From that day forward, I had to focus. I was going to become a veterinarian. I just loved the helping of people. There was that part of it. I loved the challenge of it. Super challenging, I could tell. And I didn't know much, but I said, I'm just going to expose myself to this guy who was super compelling to be around. So, and it was really cool. So from there, went to undergraduate. I'm a proud University of Maryland Terrapin. They won last night. I was there actually, and that big college basketball fan. And then went on right to the University of Pennsylvania for veterinary medicine, and graduated. I'll age myself in 08 from veterinary school, so the gray hair is real. And then did an internship in small animal emergency medicine. And so it was a small animal rotating internship at a very, large private practice in Florida. Got some business training there, which I loved. And, I'm one of those people who I'm a planner. I had from the day I graduated from vet school, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be an internal medicine specialist. I'm going to go out and do a great private practice internship. I'll end up back at Penn for my residency. I'd already told people there that was the plan. I'll see you guys in a year. I was going to open up chains of specialty hospitals as an internist. This was my plan. Like even before, Blue Pearl was doing this, like I thought that was what I wanted to do. Of course, that's not what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
But so everything got blown up. I went to my internship, and just what I realized I loved about internal medicine was like the challenging, weird cases. And it turns out that's not what, no offense to your internists who are listening, that is not what internal medicine is in the real world, right? It's chronic care. It's dealing with some difficult situations. And I love the speed and challenge of emergency medicine. And so I've spent my whole career, been a vet for 15 whatever plus years, and spent my whole career in specialty hospitals as an emergency room veterinarian. But that first year out into practice, the real world, is when I really felt like I was blindsided by the state of technology. So I'll pause there, but that's where it all started. Happy to answer any questions about that 5-second tour.
Perfect. That's a big tour, and I like it. I made a couple of comments here I want to follow up on. The first, gray hair equals wisdom. My kids were practicing on my hair last night, and Dad, you have white hair. How come? I said, that's wisdom, kids. That's what comes with it. The second is Terrapin. For us Canadians, and we are not mainly, but there's a lot of Canadians listening. Enlighten us. What is a terrapin?
Terrapin is a type of turtle. So really awesome mascot, right? To be the turtle. But I remember so when I was at the University of Maryland, we won our only national championship in college basketball. So it was 2002. I think it was my sophomore year. So they were really good then. Fun fact, my father actually played college basketball at Syracuse, like in the 70s, just for a year. But so I've, got college basketball in my blood, I guess. Always been a basketball player and fan. And so Terrapin, the phrase "fear the turtle" was coined while I was there, which makes it a little better, I think.
Very scary, very scary. And I'm not going to knock all of our listeners down there that are looking at us going, yeah, yep. You don't know it. The second thing that you mentioned there, which I thought was very interesting, business training. Was that during your internship that you were able to get business training, or that was still in your DVM? Because that is something I've never heard before.
Super interesting. So I was I think I was so VBMA, if you or your listeners have heard of that, I think it was rebranded recently, but VBMA started, I think maybe the year above me. I think it started at Penn. And it was like very early, but I joined it at Penn. It was just, sort of getting you some exposure to some business classes that you otherwise wouldn't, be a part of, like ownership and valuations and, compensation, things like that. But that wasn't, a ton of experience. When I got out, so when I was looking for internships, I stumbled across this place. Coral Springs Animal Hospital is what it's called. And it's one of the original specialty hospitals in the country. I think, the founder of it, his name's Lloyd Mizels. He started, having specialty medicine in this practice like in the 70s when it was unheard of. And he's kind of a pioneer. He's since retired, and internships change after you leave, so I don't know if it's sort of the same experience, but he ran this really interesting internship where when you started your internship for the first 3 months, you would sit down as an intern class every morning in his office, and he would go over a curriculum of business topics. I mean, it was everything from the normal ones for a couple hours every morning. All the specialists knew their interns were gone. They were just with Dr. Mizels doing, business training. And for those 3 months, I mean, he would cover topics. Here's a great one. How do you present an estimate to an emotionally charged client in an emotionally charged situation where they have no trust for you in the emergency room? And you would just cover stuff like that. It was fabulous. And it was what I actually was looking for, because remember, I wanted to get out and start specialty hospitals.
Yes.
And so this seemed like a perfect internship. And then it had, fabulous medicine. At that time, the specialists that were there were awesome teachers. And I felt pretty great about it. And that's what I got out of it, which is interesting.
And was that a built-up program where he had certain individual lessons and such, or was it off the cuff depending on what was going on in the practice at the time?
No, he had a curriculum he went through every year with the students or the interns for 3 months as a part of the internship. Yeah.
That is really interesting. Do you know if they're running that still?
I don't know if because he's not there, so I can't imagine that they're still doing it. But for me, it was a really special part of the internship. And I think for the other people who went there and did their internship, I think a lot of them take for granted even if, if you want to be a dermatologist, that it's just in the background where it's like, it makes you a better dermatologist to know some of that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Mike, anything to add to that?
Well, no, that's so cool. Like,
yes.
I had not heard of this before, and I can already tell it's like, that is amazing. Like, that is phenomenal training, because like you said, it applies to everything.
Yeah, I stumbled across it. I mean, this guy, he wasn't practicing. He had sort of retired he was a general practitioner who basically self-taught how to run a specialty hospital, and so it was just decades of learning he had developed, and he had many intern classes go through it. I'm sure he tweaked it, but there should be more of that. And I stumbled upon it because I just had like a family member who lived in the area and was a client of the hospital and said, I heard they do specialty internship training, and I visited and ended up ranking it #1, and I'm very happy I did in hindsight.
Matched up together.
Yep.
So then you go through your internship, you move into a specialty hospital, start working. What is the next in the path of Dr. Caleb?
Yeah, so that was 2008-9. I did my internship, and let me just, for you guys and the viewers, like set the table. Technology was real different then. Okay, this did not exist. That you can't see that. It's a phone, right? So just put yourself there. Okay, I carried around a Palm Pilot, I believe. I don't remember the model. So super nerd, right? And even in vet school, I carried around like a Dell Axum. This is like pre-Palm Pilot, right? And I was trying to. You guys are laughing at me, but I was super nerd, right? I was trying to use, even from those early days, I had like some hacked version of Plumbs on it. I had like a bunch, like UC Davis was starting to put out like a Palm Pilot app. Chris Brandt had made it out. If you guys know him at Davis, he's an awesome sort of innovator. But like there are all these little tools out there that, you could have, and I was carrying them around in my little, dork Palm Dell Axum, and then I was doing that with a Palm Pilot. But the point is, this part of this time in veterinary medicine, I started my internship where this specialty hospital, which had won Hospital of the Year for AHA several times, like I was writing paper records. Okay, so I did spend about a year writing paper records. But this is the time the whole profession was starting to transition, and and we were using a practice management system, but just like many others, it was sort of the Rolodex and the cash register, and then later it was retrofit with medical records, right? And that sort of defines like the state when you look back. But even then, I recognized that this transition to digital was like affecting my colleagues in interesting ways. We were always there an hour past our shift writing records, but now we were there 2 hours because of like the 11 clicks it took to do XYZ, right? And I started saying like, somebody's gonna fix this. Like this can't be the future. And I became in an unhealthy way obsessed with how this is going to happen. And I'm a hobby technologist, so I had started tinkering with all kinds of things. Like at that time I had made like an early Google Sheet or Excel like version of a board for a TV screen, and they bought a TV to like put it up there. The next year I took all of our treatment sheets, and this is definitely some foreshadowing, and I over-engineered an Excel document for a bunch of conditions, and all the specialists started adopting it as the digital treatment sheet. So we were doing it in Excel, and it would calculate a bunch of crap for you, and and then we'd print them out day to day instead of handwriting them. So I was tinkering. Right. And basically I got to a point after my internship, I stayed on there for 4 years as an ER doctor. And I got to a point where, I was starting to think like, somebody's going to solve some of these problems, and how can those be done? And I didn't have any dreams or thoughts of like starting a software company. I mean, that was like so foreign to me that I wouldn't have even thought of it. But my hospital owner, that innovator, saw that like I had an interest in some kind of, talents in these things. And he was on IDEX's software advisory board. It was called the Cornerstone Referral Advisory Board. The acronym's CRAB, which I don't think they liked very much. But it was a really cool board. IDEX was super supportive of it, and it was a board of all these specialty hospitals who wanted to make their software better for the specialty environments. And basically, it was a bunch of IT people, and they had no clinician on it. And he got me on it, and I really got to sort of give a lot of my ideas to try to make the practice better through some of these things. And so spent a few years working with AMC was on there, UF, Guelph. A bunch of the big hospitals out there were our hospital, Coral Springs, Red Bank, were giving advice to make systems better for specialty centers, which was a new part of medicine, veterinary medicine for a lot of places. And so I spent a few years on that board. I was definitely like the annoying clinician who wanted things better and better and better. Yeah, I'm sure. But it was really cool for me because I was able to channel some of that, that I developed there. And then, long story short, that led to me starting a blog. And I started writing and speaking just because what happened was we'd have, in a referral center, you serve like 600, referring vets. And they would always come into the practice and say, how'd you do that? Or how'd you, do that? And people would say, oh, Caleb can drive out to your practice. I'll show you. And that was super inefficient. And I'm a big efficiency guy. And so I started writing about it because I wanted a place on the web where I could just give links. Oh, you want to like build that? Like, here's how I did it. And that led to writing and speaking engagements. I never really thought, in the industry. And in 2013, Clinicians Brief found my blog, I think, and they were at that point starting to work on Plumb secretly, the digital version of Plumbs. And all they had done is sort of formed a partnership with the author and said, we're going to do this. But my understanding was they were looking for a veterinarian who could help lead the team and had the, sort of in the trenches experience to help design it. And it led to some consulting with them. And then they sort of pulled back the curtain on what they were trying to do. And then they offered me a full-time position, which ended up half in the clinic, half for them. And I was given a title I really wasn't qualified for, Director of New Product Development. I'm a learning animal, figured it out, read a lot, and basically learned a lot from the people I was, working for or who were working for me. And we figured out a way to, hire a team, work on this, build Plumbs, commercialize it, support it, design it, and learned everything along the way. And that's how it started.
That is so interesting. You made a couple of really big comments here that I think stick to no matter the path you take in life. The first that I heard is you were obsessed. You were in the background tinkering and obsessed with something that you didn't know that could have an answer. You figured somebody else was going to do it. But if you weren't seeing that, you were going after it yourself. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, with no, I was just trying to make us all better, right? Like no goals. Obsessed is right. Like, you're obsessed with something if after dinner, that's the thing you start working on, right? That's how I always know what you're obsessed with. These days I'm older and have less energy after my kids go to bed, right? But like before kids, if it's the thing you're working on after dinner, you're obsessed with it. Keep working on it, right?
Yeah, you might get somewhere there with it. And from a tech standpoint, it doesn't sound like you had any education. So you're teaching yourself on the go, Excel, macros, advanced features, etc. You probably, and if I'm inferring correctly, you probably didn't think that was going to commercialize or go anywhere. You just wanted to make it better for your hospital.
Yeah, around that time, that's exactly what was going on. I mean, in the summer, I think it was the summer when I started my blog, I taught myself to code because I started to think about, I started to say, nobody's solving these problems. Maybe I could be a part of the solution to it. And so one summer when I decided to start writing about it, build a website, Wix wasn't around then, it wasn't as easy. I think Squarespace was starting, but it was really WordPress. And so I taught myself some, just some HTML, CSS. I have not written a lick of code in Instinct. Nobody would want that or allow it, to be clear. But I did want to have that experience. And so I taught myself to code that summer. and that was right before, I started working on Plums with Brief Media, but it allowed me to have sort of the background to talk the talk. And I'm a hobby technologist, obviously, drawn to technology. But, I always say, if I thought like a tire was a better solution to solving some of the problems we face in our industry, I would own a tire company innovating right now. Like I definitely believe that software holds sort of a unique key to solving some of our challenges, and that's why I was sort of drawn towards software.
Yeah. And look at the basics of Plumb's Online, what it does. That's every vet possible now has that on as an app on their phone or connected to one of the PMSs now, depending on which ones. Mm-hmm. It's a must, such a little thing, but such a big change for our industry that was very much needed, as well as decreasing medical errors and everything else that comes as a result of that. Yeah.
Talk about being serendipitous. That Brief Media experience, I had written a blog post that basically was like almost venting, like, out of all the things that should be high quality in digital, it should be Plumbs. And I wrote an article about pharmaceutical references and digitization and compared human health. And that's what Brief Media found. And I think in hindsight, they were like, we need that person working on Plumbs. Like, but that's not why I wrote it, right? I mean, it was just like super, super random. But you can see how chasing that sort of your obsession can lead to things you wouldn't even think of, right?
Excellent. Well, I want to flip the switch a little bit because I want us to give enough time to culture and mission. You find these problems, you dig into them and try and create solutions for a market or for yourself or for your team, etc.
Yeah.
Walk through the elevation of the evolution of instinct to where you are today, because there's a lot of pieces, as we've chatted about off camera before here, that come in. And then I want to jump into some team and leadership questions.
Yeah. Well, the instinct story. So by the time I was working on Plums, I started reading everything I could on startups, entrepreneurship, software. My wife jokes I've been through a whole MBA, like libraries of books that I just chewed through because I was like, I remember there was a period when I was working on Plums and I looked back and it had been like, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years since I first was looking at this problem in the ground floor of specialty hospitals. And I said, nothing has changed. Like essentially nothing has changed. It feels like a sign, like I should be working on this. And Plums was really successful then. I definitely had a lot more confidence working with software engineers and the whole cycle around it. And I started talking to some of the people that I had developed relationships with working on Plums and said, I've got some much bigger ideas to solve some much bigger problems, right, for our industry. And I think there's an opportunity to do it. And I think the timing's right. And at that point, I started, this was like late 2016, we started working on just ideas, nights and weekends in my basement, my unfinished dark basement in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And it was definitely outside of our job, nights and weekends kind of ideation. We figured out we were going to build a prototype. We built a prototype. We tested it with a lot of contacts I had developed over the years in the industry at hospitals. And very quickly, we knew we were onto something. We had big, groups like executives at Blue Pearl and some of the universities just giving feedback and saying, my main feedback is, when can this be ready? We will pay for this. And we knew we had something then. There's just a sense you can get. And so I had been talking to, when you first raise money or think about raising money for a company like this, I have a great advisor who calls it the triple Fs: friends, family, and fools, who fund the first, round. And I had some triple Fs in my life, right? An uncle, a bunch of people who were ready to flush some money down the toilet is what I told them, because most of these don't get off the ground, right? And so we raised a triple F round. It was my capital too. I felt like that was important. And so, we were sort of off to the races. We raised just enough money to sort of like pay for my two co-founders' salaries so that they could focus on this. Me and one other co-founder sort of kept our day jobs because we weren't as needed day to day, and we built the real thing. I remember,
if I can jump in there for a moment. Yeah. I'd love to dive into the we for a second, because it's your idea, you're thinking about it, and yet there's nobody that makes a success out of a big company like this without we involved. How did you choose the we's? Where did that come together? There's a lot of people in the vet space that want to do amazing things. How do you make that happen?
This, you know, I have a lot of young entrepreneur veterinarians reach out to me about stuff like this. I just had one, you know, email me today, like, you know, talking about co-founders, and it's a really interesting thing. I mean, I probably, had I known the people and had the experiences I had, probably would have started this company like 2 years out of school, honestly. But I didn't, because I think I was smart enough then to know I didn't know enough and I didn't have the right people involved. And so I didn't do anything about it, right? And then once I had worked with some of the people on Plumbs, I realized that I had found like a group of people who could pull this off. And it's part of the magic of where we are today. So there was one of my colleagues who's the CTO at Instinct, who helped hire me there, and he, you know, he is an engineer, but he brought the technical co-founding that I didn't have, essentially. And so the first conversation about Instinct was with him. It was he and I one-on-one, and I said, you know, I'm interested in doing this, and he said, yeah, I'm interested in doing that. That sounds awesome. Let's do this. And so we started talking about how to pull it off, and his recommendation were 2 other people that we worked with. We sort of said, like, who else might we need? And so these 2 other people brought, you know, tangential expertise. One brought like really strong QA, project management. She's a business analyst background. Like she brought, you know, I always say like and then the other one is a front-end engineer. And I always say the 3 of us are like, we're pirates. I mean, we just jump on the pirate ship. We're optimistic. We're just rocking and rolling. She like asks the right questions, documents things well, make sure the quality's in place. So like, it's a really perfect sort of squad. And all those people are still at Instinct today. And then there was one other really key ingredient, and that is my advisor, who, you know, as he likes to say, or this is something I think I stole from him, but he's really good at giving 2x4 advice. There are all these 2x4s ready to smack you in the forehead as an early entrepreneur as you round corners, and he helps me duck 50% of the time, is what he says. And the 2x4 advice, I stumbled upon this guy. His name's Rick, and he's been just instrumental in getting us here, helping fill my entrepreneurial holes, helped advise me on how to put the team together. So yeah, that's sort of the team, if that helps.
That sure does. That sure does. Mike, anything to add to it?
Quick question with an impossible answer. How many hours have you spent working on Instinct? Like lifetime total, even before it had a name of Instinct, like the problem, the concept, just ballpark it.
It's an incredible number. I'm scared to ballpark it, because one of my college buddies is one of those triple Fs, early investors. I debated having him because I didn't want it to ruin our relationship. He's one of my good friends, right? But he and I were having a beer one day, and he's like, you know, let's say you even make a bunch of money from Instinct one day, like besides salary, like, you know, as the founder of the company. Have you ever done like the hourly rate math of what it would turn out? And there's like, the number would have to be so big that the hour, like basically I'm working under minimum wage because of how many hours, you know, you spend on it as an entrepreneur. So I don't even want to guess, Mike, because it's probably a depressing number to most people, but it goes back to the obsessed thing. I mean, you know, for the first 5 years, you know, we've been doing it for 5.5 years. It's every day. I mean, it's every day. It's a really, you know, people, you know, really talk about like how unhealthy it is for you to work so much on a project. The reality is you can't show a successful company that hasn't had at least one person doing it like I have. And that's not a complaint. There's rarely a day that goes by where I'm like, oh, I just don't want to be doing any of this, right? Like there's stuff, but I mean, it's you have to be that obsessed. You have to really love the problem you're solving, the people you're solving for. You can't fake that. You'll burn out, right? So it's a great question with an answer that you probably aren't satisfied by.
No, I'm totally satisfied. That's exactly why I asked the question, because listening to all it, Jonathan already hit on the obsessed part, which jumped out. And then the other word I had was challenge, like all the way back. You identified the problem, and you loved the challenge of solving the problem. Yeah. And then you just said it there. And so the reason I asked the question is for people listening, you know, maybe this is their first time hearing of Instinct in early 2023. And it's like, you had said like you had already officially started working on it for 6 years in nights and weekends in your basement. And it had been percolating for 10 years before that 6 years. So this is 16 years in the making of what you do after dinner, in the evening, on the weekends, find the right team.
Holidays.
Like it didn't happen overnight, right?
No.
And the idea of balance is like, no, there was no balance. It's obsession.
Yeah, and it's not helpful. Like going back to Caleb 5 years ago, it wouldn't be helpful to like have this session with you, Mike, and you go, "Hey, just so you know, here's what's coming." Like that wouldn't have helped me, right? But it is the reality of every story like this, right? It really is. Like articles in TechCrunch, you're going to see the great stuff, but you're not going to see the real stuff that you go through. And one of my keys to success is my wife and I, who is my best friend, right? We went into this pretty intentionally. In fact, going back, I had a fork in the road. We had a dinner where it was like, am I going to go on and do my critical care residency? I was 4 years out, or am I going to chase this like thing I'm obsessed with at night, right? And I was debating it really heavily. And she's like, why are we even talking about this? Start pursuing the technology thing and see where it goes. Like, what more are you love being an ER vet? Like, what more are you going to solve with that if you become a criticalist? And she sort of, woke me up with that. And because of that, like, she's been through this all with me. We went into it knowing what we were getting into, right? Instinct's our fourth child. As unhealthy as that sounds, that's what it is. So, in some ways it competes with my family, but as we've gotten to this, place we're in a much healthier place for Caleb as the CEO. It's been a hard transition because of that, but I have a team who I'm not doing everything all the time. I even have really close friends who've, like this summer, I was able to take some time off on a Friday and really not care about my email and know that if there's a fire, there are better people equipped to put it out than I am. And that's a change. But it's been a really, my friends have noticed, like, it's even a really good change just for me. And you have to transition back in, but takes a lot of work to get there.
Yeah. Good for you. And the last thing I'll say on it for the listener, the piece you said about just notice what you do after dinner. That's so simple, but so like accurate, for someone listening, if they're like, what should I be doing with my life? Without giving it any thought, just think back. What do you do after dinner? And it's like, there's probably hints there.
Yeah, there probably are. I mean, you have to, like, you shouldn't be working all the time, right? It's not healthy. You should be, watching TV, reading books, doing hobbies. But what do you think about? What do you want to work on, right? It's a really good tell.
Okay, last one, because I could literally take this conversation another hour. There's so many pieces I want to dig on, and we don't have the time to do so. Caleb, 2023, Instinct's in a different place than it was even a year ago. Explain how you maintain motivation, drive, and challenge for a group that continues to grow, and probably provide a little bit of background to that. Your company's gone through a transition here recently or in the last year. For our listeners, what does that look like? And what does the life of Caleb look like now and your main role?
Yeah. We've grown a lot. We went from a one product market entry point solution kind of product where we were solving this digital treatment sheet situation to 3 products. At the heart of it is what we call Instinct EMR, which we hope is really the future of modern PIMS for veterinary hospitals. We're early in that journey, right? Once we knew we were going to take this on and we had an opportunity, we really view it as that to solve this. Won't happen overnight, but work hard at this and really solve this in a special way for the industry. We knew we had a responsibility to do things differently. I joke to the team, not joke, but I'm sort of, always talking about we're going from pirate to Navy mode right now. Nice. It used to be the Caleb single pirate ship. And I think I stole that from a book called Blitzscaling. I think Reid Hoffman wrote that, but we talk a lot about it in the last year because we're going from the Caleb pirate ship where everything sort of feeds up to me to now we have a fleet of ships. We have a sales ship, we have a sports ship, we have a product and engineering ship. We have an HR ship, and I try not to meddle in those ships. I mean, people are being hired at Instinct who've never talked to me, probably just know my name. It's a weird transition. So we have 3 products. Instinct EMR is really our future. We're still focused on treatment plan. We offer it for hospitals and continue to support it in a big way. and then we have scripts, which you guys all know about because you talked to Elliot. But we have about 60 people on our team, which is incredible. And we're, to answer your question, it's been a transitional year. We took on our first professional investor, which, kicked a lot of this off. It allows us to have some resources to really lift the team. But we did that intentionally. We know the responsibility we're taking on by having all these specialty hospitals rely on us as their full solution. And we want to live up to that, whether that's security, support, the product growth. We feel a pretty big responsibility to a profession I deeply care about, and a lot of the people who've joined our team do. And so how do I motivate myself? Well, I don't need to think about it too much. There is so much that goes on. Someone said to me the other day, so you're not, hiring people, you're not writing the code, you're not doing X, Y, and Z. What do you do all day? And that's a great question for a founder and CEO. There's a lot of different ways you can answer that, but I have the space and time to think a little bit about strategy and vision. I'm definitely still heavily involved in the product to make sure what we're doing. I'm definitely love talking to customers. And then weirdly, like this Friday, I practice still once or twice a month. And it's really important to me because I get to use our software and I think it makes us special.
For those that are inquiring or want to know more about specific to the software, and then you're using it in practice with the 3 products, and that focus on instant EMR, there's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of serverless softwares coming out. How do you differentiate yourself as you're continuing to both motivate, challenge, and you need to bring new people on into an ecosystem, which from the outside perspective, it's not full, but it's the competition's there.
Yeah. It's an interesting time. If you read a lot about startups and successful startups, you can look at funding, you can look at team, you can look at product. I forget who did this research, but there's some now pretty famous research that timing has so much to do, more than all the others actually, in success or failure, right? When you put all those ingredients together. And I really believe we're at an interesting point in timing for this. Not only do you have the industry transitioning, right, in mass, there's still a ton that are on legacy systems, whether they're using paper records or not. They're on legacy systems that are either going to go away or can't be the future, right? Server-based systems. And then you have a lot of competition in the market. I'm a big fan of Crossing the Chasm, that sort of famous book on, how you take a market. Basically the high level is you find a beachhead, right? You can't take a whole country. You have to start with something. And it's sort of the Seth Godin approach, like find your tribe, right? And so, how do we differentiate ourselves? Well, we're not trying to solve this for everybody, or we weren't when we started. We were trying to solve this for the biggest specialty emergency teaching hospitals in the world. They have very unique needs. They were underserved. They have much less competition serving them. And that was all strategic. We also felt that we had unique expertise to do it. So they're harder to serve, but that was the way that was our go-to-market strategy. And we did that well. I mean, now more than half of the US's teaching institutions are powered by Instinct in some way, which is pretty wild to say. We have, in terms of the EMR, we know that there's tons of competition out there for full PIMS, right? But I think we have a unique story. There are only really 2 or 3 independent software vendors at this point. And we're the only ones that has a veterinarian leading it. And we have I think we have 9 veterinarians on the team. We have veterinary nurses, students, ex-practice managers. I mean, we've really built something that has unique experience and a unique team at its core. And I think that's the first thing that differentiates us. The second thing is we're born out of workflow, which is super unique. We are the only system that has a full, and I would argue it's the gold standard treatment plan out there. And it's not just another system you log into, right? Even if it's integrated or not. It is the EMR, the PIMS is literally built out of it. You can't rip it out. And that's actually the way we practice now, right? In modern centers, the workflow is the heart of it. And I talk a lot about how that feeds everything, right? Whether that's how the estimates turn into treatment sheets if you want them to, or how the automation from the treatment sheet automatically charges for things like hospitalization or fluid fees. So those are the 2 things I think at the core of our differentiation. But that's just how we're starting. I mean, we are focused on general practices. You'll hear a lot more about that this year, and we have an interesting strategy for that. But I'll stop there. I could go all day on that.
That's it. And as you speak again, I have 5 more questions, which are going to hold us back from being able to take them on. So that might equal a later this year conversation as things evolve. Because again, we didn't even get into financial goals, life planning, design, efficiency.
I know. I wanted to talk about you guys. I had all these questions, but clearly we're not going to get to them. So maybe in part 2, you can let me grill you.
I do. I'm going to jump in with one last thing because it is just too compelling not to say something. When you open that, you said, you know, your friends will ask you, what do you do? Right. And then you said you have this team around you, which is excellent. Good for you to have that there. And you said you have the space and the time for strategy and vision. And that really jumped out at me. So it's like, good for you. You have it dialed in. And I find it unfortunate that so many people, the key word in there is do, right? They feel like, you know, if you're not whatever, manual labor, like seeing a client right this second, you're not doing something. And it's like, as the CEO with the vision and the strategy, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing, which is taking that space and having that clarity. And I feel like that's missing from a lot of people. Like, even if you're not the CEO of a startup or a company, you're the CEO of your own life, right? And you have to give yourself that space and clarity before you get into action. So I just wanted to say that, because like, that's amazing. You know, as you created that team around you to kind of get out of your basement and having to do everything, now you have the fleet. So that was excellent. I had to chime in. And it's not easy, right? Like, it actually goes against everything. If you do this, if you are the CEO or director of new product, like if that's in your DNA to take on roles like that, you inherently, I mean, it should be no secret, you think you're the best at all the things you can do, right? And so if you're that person, it goes against everything you can think of to give some of that up, right? And I take no credit for this because my team has taught me that they can do it in many cases better than me. My board, now I have a board, right? They force me to think on, you know, getting out of the weeds and some of this stuff. So it takes a village to get people like us, right, to think like that. Because I work with a CEO coach that's been instrumental for me. You know, that those things are, you know, people have to push you to get, you know, and I'm tempted all the time to get back into the weeds.
On a daily basis. Caleb, this has been fantastic. Again, Mike coming in with his philosophical approach, which is a great comment to wrap this piece up here. Really appreciate you coming on. We need to move over to the impact round as we're over time. Impact round is a short number of questions to be able to learn a little bit more in the background. You can answer any way you want to. And so therefore, first question is, are you a cat or a dog person?
Oh, great question. I'm going to answer cog. Actually, I'm going to answer dat because I'm like 51 dog. I hate to say that, but I'm one of those people who's an equal opportunity dog and cat people. Love them both so much.
But you pick dog as the 51. Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. True or false? And I think we already know the answer to this one. I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian since I was a kid.
Yeah, that's true.
How would your friends describe what you do for a living?
Confusing or crazy. They're always perplexed, you know, by the mix of practice and software entrepreneur, which they should be.
Nice. What is your favorite hobby?
I am gonna say sports, whether that's team or playing or watching team sports. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we're over time, but are you a Philadelphia Eagles fan? Because this will be coming out.
I'm not. Oh, yeah. I'm glad you're giving me that opportunity. I am a New York Giants fan. So
okay, well, they're in the playoffs too. By the time this airs, one of them may be out of the playoffs, but we'll see.
Hopefully, it's the Eagles.
Yeah.
What in this world are you most grateful for?
My family. Yeah, my family. I have an amazing wife, amazing 3 boys, great pets. Yeah.
Excellent. And in round 2, we'll get into that as we plan. Yeah. Life planning and for success as you're raising, you know, amazing individuals in this life. So thank you very much, Caleb, for joining us this afternoon, or this morning, I should say. I think our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation. And for those that may want to learn more or reach out to you, where do they do so? How do they best get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm best on email. They can find us on our website, instinct.vet, and also on LinkedIn.
Yeah, perfect. Well, with that, as always, the last message is left to our guest. What message would you like to leave for the veterinary community?
I am a big believer, and I speak to the students on this a lot. Veterinary medicine is one of the most amazing career paths. I hear a lot of people sort of say the opposite about it, but it is such an amazing mission. What we do, it's special. I've been given this perspective as a software leader with people who aren't veterinarians working with us, who are drawn to this unique community, this unique profession. We're this interesting mix of tight-knit, doing something truly meaningful. Can't argue about that for the world, no matter which corner. And there are so many challenges because of the healthy growth of this profession to solve. Chase your passion. If you're a young, especially if you're a younger veterinarian trying to figure it out, there's just so much. There's so much that is needed from you in terms of sort of normal problems, challenges to be solved. And I'm, benefiting from that, hopefully making a dent in our profession as well. And chase your obsessions, and I think it'll lead to some interesting places.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap, on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly, so be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and/or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.